Hello and welcome to Exchanges. The AI revolution is here. Working has changed. The way that we look at work is different. We have now found ourselves consulting more than ever before, and more people are turning to become founders of their own internal or external businesses. So how do we deal with that? And how do we actually build the brand and the leverage that we need to make them successful? Natalie MacDonald is, and I'll put my hand up, a very, very close personal friend. We've known each other for a long, long time, but she is an expert in this area. She has got her own organization called Working At It, and she has spent over a decade and a half dealing with the communication, the brand awareness, and the brand creation you need to drive yourself forward. But also the passion behind what she does is about how parenting and carers navigate the work environment in the current 2026 and beyond numbers that we're going to deal with. So without any further ado, here is Natalie MacDonald on this week's Exchanges. Natalie MacDonald, welcome to Exchanges.
Evan Lucas, thank you for having me. Who'd have thought about 15 years after we very first met, which we are coming up to now because we're both very old, who would have thought that the shoe would be on the other foot and you would actually be asking me questions?
I've always asked you the questions when you came on. Yeah, just so again, for those listening, background, Natalie and I have been in communication from when she started in Riga, of all places.
In Riga, in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, in Eastern Europe. And then you moved to Australia and all that kind of stuff. And how that happened, we were talking when you were over there, and now you're here. You've had an incredible career over those 15 years, which I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be sort of where I came to it. Your whole world is around and has been around media. It's been around journalism. But realistically, what you've now found yourself doing and why I wanted to get you on here is about the experience of the work environment, the experience of the work market, how it's not just transforming, but moving at such a speed of light that the way that employees and employers are dealing with it is very different. So take me through how you've come to now do Work At It, which is your new venture, and congratulations, but why you felt so strongly about actually starting up this whole movement idea.
Sure, of course. So, as you say, for background, as we say, the shoe is on the other foot. You were asking me the questions. And once upon a time, for a number of years, it was the other way around as a business reporter overseas, first in Europe and then in Australia at Sky News Business, before I moved into the world of tech and joined LinkedIn as a founding news editor here in Sydney and working with that team over the course of 7 years, as you say, very much in that professional workplace setting. And I think what was fantastic about that work and where I was really able to flourish and grow was the recognition that we are all so much more than just our job titles and just the industries that we work in. So the type of coverage that I got to do through the bushfire crisis and into COVID, supporting small businesses, interviewing CEOs, bank chiefs, government ministers, small business owners themselves, who were really, really doing it tough at that time and connecting them with the resources and the information that they needed. And that pivoted into diversity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace. So how we can support underrepresented communities and underrepresented voices like women, caregivers, LGBTQIA+, those who are neurodivergent or disabled. How can we support them in the workplace and ensure that we are building stronger workforces, stronger organizations, and therefore stronger economies? Now, to get to where I am now, which is Working At It, my advisory that supports professionals, small businesses and organizations and execs when it comes to building purpose-led, values-driven personal brands and how they deliver messages that matter to the people that matter to them and essentially connect content strategy with their business goals. I was made redundant. I was part of this early wave of the AI transition. And I say this with a smile because lol, how can you not? It's a laugh or cry situation, really. And I did do the crying a little bit as well, I should add. But I was made redundant 6 weeks after returning from my second parental leave. Gosh, we love that for the mums, don't we? And that was part of these AI-led changes in the workplace. Now, when I came out the other side of LinkedIn, I had 35,000 followers on the platform. I had a newsletter that has 116,000 subscribers. I came out with a platform, and I had used that platform to talk about, as I say, small business, gender equity, working caregivers. I had fronted a lot of LinkedIn products around LinkedIn Lives and conversations. The role that I had and the way that I had used that platform and nurtured my community meant that I came out with options. I did that typical LinkedIn redundancy post that unfortunately we're seeing so many of now. And my comments and my emails were flooded with people being like, would you be interested in freelancing here? Would you be interested in guest hosting podcasts, events? Also got some random ones around, my medtech firm in Missouri. Would you be interested in checking out the website? Like, no, Mr. Missouri, thank you so much, but we're probably not like the key to one another's future financial success. But my point being, I came out the other side with options.
Yeah,
and
can I just
not everyone does.
Before we go any further?
Yeah,
yeah, because I want to keep going with that story.
Yeah.
Can we step back?
Mm-hmm.
And without divulging your own personal intellectual property, because clearly that's what you now use with your brand, talk me through the mechanics of building that LinkedIn scenario. Because, people pay big money to have six-figure followings on a newsletter and having, big, high five-figure numbers on subscribers and followers. What's the mechanics behind that? Because again, there's like this inverted commas out there, this idea that we don't know the secret herbs and spices and the secret sauce and all this kind of stuff to do it. What's the magic in the mechanics that got you there?
Being very human. And I know that's a really awful answer. So let me rewind a little bit.
Even though the AI and the algorithm is now in charge of how that works.
But it rewards values-led, purpose-driven, expertise-led content that speaks to a problem that other people within your community are trying to solve. So just to go back a bit, you're right. Obviously, my land is LinkedIn, and there are so many people out there, Evan, who claim to be experts on the platform, and they are just setting out all these myths and magical ways. The fact is, there are 17 million professionals in Australia using LinkedIn. And there are a lot of people that are essentially trying to fly the plane that I helped to build. So I always say, be very, very discerning when it comes to who you are following for advice, when it comes to things like LinkedIn. I'm not necessarily saying you have to follow me for advice, but just be discerning about who you get that information from. And if it's not coming from professionals at LinkedIn or those very close to the source, then just be wary. But in terms of what the platform rewards, so some really, really simple things. If you post on LinkedIn once a week, that is 4xing your profile visibility. If you post on LinkedIn twice a week, that is 5xing your profile visibility. So it's not asking for a lot, and you start to kind of get that positive feedback loop. So if you're trying to do like some habit setting, that's a bit of a start point. What LinkedIn and what it doesn't reward is the super heavy promo stuff. LinkedIn wants your expertise, and not from a perspective of like stealing your IP, as you say, or stealing your data, but how you are using that to build community, to give, and also to get help. So really almost creating a bit of a search engine, really, about how you can build your career and how you can make smart choices. So the example that I always give on content is I cannot stand it. It makes me want to throw my computer out the window when someone like posts an award. You know, those static, like it's an award on a desk. It's like, well done. Like you won an award for a nomination that you probably had to pay for. And it's just like, I'm so pleased to announce blah, 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 blah. It doesn't tell us anything. It says nothing. So if you want to level up that kind of content, you might say, here's how we build award-winning teams at such and such with 3 to 5 guiding principles when you're hiring. So that's like, we're getting a bit into the intermediate level. If you want to really notch it up and get to like expert level, here are the 3 hiring principles that we use when we build award-winning teams. And here are some of the mistakes that we made along the way. You are instantly humanizing yourself, humanizing your organization. People are inherently ambulance chasers. They want to know the shit that went wrong in order to be right. And you are immediately flipping that conversation around to be expertise led, to be showing why you are an expert in your field, why you might be a great manager or a great employer. And it is constantly looking to position yourself as an expert of choice, as an employer of choice, as a leader of choice within your industry. So it's getting smart about that content.
Yeah. So then that obviously gets picked up by the algorithm and away we go. So getting back to what you were saying before, I rudely interrupted you with the mechanic question, is you now have that brand, right? So you've got that base, you've got the 5 to 6 years of heavy lifting that you did to build the work at it sort of community. What are you using that brand for? And then how have you turned that into something that is now clearly driving what you do forward, allowing you to do freelance, allowing you to do, in my world that I refer to it as what you want, when you want, how you want?
It was really about, so I guess to move away from the mechanics back into the feels a little bit. Obviously, as I say, when I came out the other side of LinkedIn, I was just inundated with requests, and a lot of it was around LinkedIn and was around how I had built the platform, and for a while, in all honesty, I found it really fucking galling. Because I was like, guys, they're not paying me anymore. And this is...
To stop on that, because this is what I was going to ask you next. You and I have had this discussion offline many times about brand turning into value. So how do you go from having that incredible brand, that incredible presence that you've built, to actually asking to be paid for it? Because there is something there that annoys me as well. And it's why I'm glad you've already gone there. Why do we, particularly in this country, I would argue, refuse to pay for expertise and services in this kind of world when everyone knows they need the expertise? How do we breach that?
I think there is a feeling, and especially obviously at the moment when we look at the AI acceleration, there is a real sense of feeling that like, oh, I can do this myself. Mm-hmm. Or alternatively, a sense of feeling of like, oh, I know I should do this, but I just don't have the time, or I don't know where to start. And it becomes too hard basket, or just this can that is like just constantly kicked down the road. And I mean, I'm the same. My New Year's resolution was that I was going to start leveraging TikTok, and I did well for a while. And honestly, I've slowed down on it. And so I understand it. And I think that's the thing.
Did you get the value out of it?
No, it's just that I have 2 small children and a small business and a freelance portfolio, and ran out of time. But no, I think TikTok is, I think it's fun. I get it. I think also a lot of, but I think that's because it's difficult in some instances, not all instances, to distill maybe the conversations that you're having, or even some of the conversations that I'm having, into something that is like a TikTok friendly format. So it does take a little bit of reimagining to be like, how do I translate this conversation into that format? Now that is the TikTok world. Obviously that's not my space. But I'm trying to make it my space. But meaning I understand how people can just go, oh, I'm particularly small businesses. I'm so busy. I've got this to do and I have that to do and I have this to do and I have that to do. And it's recognizing that it just comes all the way down. From my perspective, I think the expertise just leads. And as I say, the fact that the knowledge that I have around the platform, around how to build Black brands, is just pretty unparalleled. And I don't say that in like a really arrogant, ego way. It is just fact.
I'm all about the idea that we need to embrace our own expertise. We need to embrace what our inverted commas. I try and use this in a different way. What our gift is, right? Everybody has their own gift, and I know your gift. So I try and say to people when they, the Australian, also UK thing is the tall poppy syndrome, or just sort of, what the Americans are really good at is actually saying, this is me and this is what I'm good at. Right?
And so I think to give you a couple of numbers on that, as I say, in Australia, there are 17 million professionals using LinkedIn. There has been about a 58% growth in the number of people changing their LinkedIn profile to founder. So people who maybe have been made redundant, or they've thought in the age of AI, oh, actually, I can compete. Like this is my comparison point. But of that, a significant proportion, about 73%, I believe it is, of micro and small businesses are still looking to their human-led community. And if you're not using LinkedIn as your digital shop front, essentially, you're missing out on huge reach and huge access. And so that was really, it was that knowledge and that understanding that I had come out of the other side with options and with opportunity, but not all professionals. And again, I speak particularly to my underrepresented communities, to women and caregivers largely, who we know in times of economic vulnerability and workplace transformation, which is what we find ourselves in right now. They are the last people to have invested in themselves, in the skills, the confidence, the tools that they need to build personal brands, to build out their network, which means if the worst happens, they don't have those same options and they don't have the same opportunities that I have been able to build. So while Working at It looks after all professionals and all industries, at its heart, it is ensuring that professionals from all communities and all backgrounds and industries and experiences have opportunities. And so being able to share my expertise and continuing to have impact at scale. That's the real like heartwarming driver behind it.
Yeah. So that then moves into the next part. You talked quite passionately about your family situation. I know you're very passionate about helping those individuals in there. Does that go back to those numbers you said before around, the increase in founders? It's not just redundancy, but the flexibility of running a micro and small business is part of what you're also seeing in your world, and why you are trying to leverage out that expertise about how you can actually use social media as your shop front, use small, and medium enterprise thinking to build not just your brand, but getting paid gig and getting paid services. Because as you said, I agree completely with what you said before, is that AI is now making this idea that I don't need human service. And I'm not talking about human resources, I'm talking about human service, because AI can give it to me. Where are we with that point as well?
So, I mean, we can go all the way back to COVID and frankly, even earlier, when we look at, as I've mentioned before, when there are periods of economic disruption, it is women and caregivers who are disproportionately impacted. And we see that time and time and time again. And although obviously, as I say, I was early in the AI transition related restructures, it's impossible not to, again, continue to see these cases and continue to see how this plays out for women and caregivers. And I think organizations and frankly, I think even at a federal government level, we need to be thinking about what does the AI transformation mean for workplaces. We are seeing tens of hundreds of thousands of professionals in Australia and overseas being made redundant. And we have to think about what does that do to workforce participation, to productivity, which, gosh, we've heard a lot about that in the last 12 or so months, and what it means economically speaking moving forward. I think that is a genuine consideration that we need to be looking at, because we are seeing huge numbers being laid off. Where the fuck do they go?
Yeah.
So where do they go?
So on that, let's because I want to drill into that, because let's use CBA as the example, right? So CBA has been pretty open about how they see the AI revolution going, particularly in banking services. We saw them, remove 45 jobs last year directly, in their words, linked to AI. They've had 400 job losses already, indirectly or directly lost on it since. They're spending $90 million on reskilling, but they are also still preparing everybody in the organization that further job losses are coming. Is that the model, or is it something else? Because again, they argue that they're doing the right thing, that they're actually communicating loudly and proudly that AI will change it. And therefore, it's not just accepting it, it's about they are saying we're spending the money to to move it. But I get back to your point about productivity. What we found from, again, their own numbers, the productivity that came from using AI created so much work they actually get to hire more people to fix the volume it created behind it. Where are we with regards to how we now operate from an employment perspective and from a hiring and from a human resources perspective, with that as the background to where AI is clearly going at a big institutional level?
I think we're creating a workforce that's really scared. I think we're creating a really anxious and a really nervous workforce. And if you look at when DEI was really a trending conversation, and I hate the fact that it was trending and now it's kind of not, because it just should be. It just should be part of the fabric of our workplaces.
Just explain DEI.
Sorry, diversity, inclusion, equity, or actually, as we used to call it at LinkedIn, it was DIBS, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And I really, really like that phrase. And so I've inherited that one. I've kept that one with me. But we would talk a lot about psychological safety in the workplace and people being able to show up as their whole selves and do their work. And COVID just changed that forever. Our professional and our personal lives had never been closer. I became a parent during COVID. And so I never had to do the work like you don't parent like you don't work thing. And I've spoken only gratefully of that. That was a magical ignorance for me, and it's wonderful. But I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing workers who are either job hugging. Job hugging is rampant at the moment. People are frankly too job hugging, staying in the role that you're in because frankly you're too scared of what's out there. So staying in a role that you might have outgrown because it offers you security at that moment in time.
It's almost a job blanket by the sounds of that term.
Yeah, it's just like a little security blanket. Yeah, 100%. And why wouldn't you? Cost of living crisis, our food bills, our daycare bills, rents, mortgages are soaring. Why wouldn't you job hug? So you've got potentially, if you're looking at an office, if you're looking at a workforce, you've got, a certain percentage of them are job hugging. They don't necessarily want to be there, but they're too scared to leave. The rest of them are desperately trying to catch up with AI. And again, there was some data that was released by LinkedIn late last year, early this year, that said that people felt like trying to learn AI and trying to learn these systems was like a full-time job in itself. And that you actually had certain demographics that were kind of fibbing a little bit, maybe being less truthful about how quickly they were adapting and how strong they actually were using AI systems. And then you also have obviously your percentage of your workforce that are showing up and they're happy to be there and do their thing. But I think if you've got a workforce that doesn't really know if they're coming or going, how can they be contributing to their full extent and not, chatting in the kitchen or reading some of the tech gossip websites or whatever about, are there whispers of layoffs? What is the world going to look like? Am I going to be able to pay my mortgage in 6 months' time? That is terrifying. And that's not to bring it back to me, but to bring it back to me for a moment. Why? Please. It is so, so, so important to be doing it now, to be investing in your personal brand, to be nurturing your network, to be creating an avenue and a platform to demonstrate your skills and experience and expertise, and also who you are as a person. Because that network that you are nurturing could be the stepping stone to your next opportunity when, should you need it or want it.
Yeah. We've had a couple of guests on here sort of talk similar about that. I mean, they talk about the productivity of having an organization where, your team isn't able to thrive because they're under some form of pressure, I think is the word to use it, whether that is a marginalized community, whether that is somebody on the spectrum, whether that is, again, using your term, people that are in job hugging. The impact of therefore their output is much, much lower because they're not actually completely focused on their scope. The thing you just raised there is there's two sides to this that's also come out of COVID. Is I need to then ask you about, work-life balance with working from home. So you talked about actually having communication with staff, the ability to actually have lunch together, to communicate, somewhat socialize, etc. What's your view about where working from home is going? You've seen Victoria now legislate it to try and make it law for all, but it doesn't work as easily as that. What is your view about how that step will become the future of work and how firms deal with that as part of their work culture?
I think hybrid work and flexible work, it's such a double-edged sword. I do think it is brilliant. I do think it is great. I do think empowering and supporting professionals, again, in industries and roles and organizations where it does make sense and it can be done. I think that hybrid work is a really, really excellent thing. And I think that organizations that are pulling teams into the office and making that enforced 5 days a week, I think it is antiquated. And I think the flow through impact in years to come, we might not see it or feel it now. But I think fast forward 3, 4, 5 years, and I think that you will start to see that in the workforce.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. The thing that's sort of fascinating again about it is it's the cost of it is the other part of the question. So you're looking, and again, speaking off air before we came onto the podcast, organizations and where they sit, how they're hiring, what they're looking for, their structure. How many of them have modernized and how many of them haven't? Because that's the next part of your question here is, there are some really good ones, there's some really poor ones, and there's ones that have got heads in the sand. How do we get to modernized teams? How do we deal with not just the AI story, let's sort of put that to one side, but what the better teams are doing to deal with all the changes and everything we've just discussed?
It's a conversation that we've been having for years, but it's making your office and your workplace and your workspace a place to be. Going into the office is bloody expensive. I'm currently for a freelance role that I'm in at the moment. I'm currently I am traveling in, and I'm happy to do so. But it's really expensive. For various reasons, I'm driving. I'm paying for parking. I'm grabbing lunch and sometimes breakfast because coming back to, I have 2 small children. My mornings are like my own personal Vietnam getting out the house. If I've managed to eat something by 11:35, like that's a bloody good day. But I'm having to pay. It is expensive. And again, in like a cost of living crisis, like those are things that are weighing on your employees. And if they are having to balance, okay, well, I've got an offer from this organization, I've got an offer from this organization. Do they facilitate hybrid work? If they're in the office, what benefits are there to me there? Is my entire team located there, or am I in a geographically diverse team? In which case, if I'm going into the office and being made to go into the office, what am I actually getting out of it? So it's looking holistically at what are our workplaces, and it's not just having a fucking ping pong table. It's having actual access to amenities and resources that are fulfilling and that actually speak to all facets of wellness, whatever that may look like to the individual.
Yeah. So getting back to working at it, your whole thing is around entrepreneurship and about driving entrepreneurship, particularly, as you said, for mums and carers. Take me through what an entrepreneurship look like is for a mum in the modern world, because back in the day it would have been starting up a small business that may have meant you went online, bought stuff out of China and sold a good of some description. It then became a service. But what is entrepreneurship in the current environment that you're trying to harbour?
So I guess to use myself as an example. I refer to my this season that I'm in as a portfolio career. And Evan, frankly, like it's probably similar, to yourself as well. And that's the thing. I think that is becoming really, really normal when it comes to how many of us are operating. And it might be that you have something that is a side hustle, or it might be, like myself, I have the advisory working at it where I support clients, as well as a freelance gig here or there, as well as maybe writing an article for an organization, or doing an event hosting spot, or that kind of thing. And it's this idea that all together, if you put that jigsaw piece all together, it kind of makes up an entire career, or it makes up certainly about 23 and a half hours of the day, which is how it feels, some weeks. And I think that is actually really reflective of a lot of the individuals and the organizations that I'm dealing with, where they're kind of piecing bits together that fill out sort of an entire community. And so I've worked with leaders across market research, PR, education, again, much in the media space as well, a lot, because that's been my home for many years. And so I think it's a sliding scale. Some of them are, what we would call solopreneurs. Some of them do have employees. But it all comes back to kind of the same thing, especially when we're looking at teams. And that is, how do you use your employees as your brand ambassadors, essentially, leveraging the experts that you have within your organization. And they are all experts, otherwise you wouldn't have hired them unless you've kind of done bad hiring. And using their expertise and empowering them with, as I say, the skills and the confidence and the tools to own their voice, to own their stories, and to go out and tell that to the world, and then allow that to halo back to your brand. And this idea that a rising tide floats all boats. If, you've got your CMO or even your EA is out there telling your brand story and sharing their expertise, that is all going to come back to you, and that rising tide floats all boats.
Going back to your portfolio career, because I completely agree with you with where you sit there, how are organizations seeing those kinds of people in their organization and vice versa? Because, I'm sure you've experienced it. I'm going to use my own personal story. There is resistance to organizations with someone like you and I, where, we sit there and go, look, I'm very happy to consult to you, very happy to work on this scenario, but I won't come on as a full-time employee. How are you finding that deal? Because I agree with you, portfolio careers are the flex that comes with it, but some institutions love it, some don't. How are you dealing with that?
Honestly, some of the conversations that I've had from my perspective is, at first glance, it is we have a content team, or we have a person whose role and responsibilities that is. And then it gets to sort of that second phase, and there is sort of a moment of, but we don't have that expertise.
Yeah.
And so actually something that I did coming into the new year was a slight repositioning as a fractional partner. And as someone who can work with your marketing team or a founder-led organization, or even working directly with consultancies or PR firms as kind of internal in terms of on client success programs and that kind of thing. And people do seem to be getting that and understanding that a touch more coming into 2026, when we are obviously seeing such a rise of people doing fractional work, people building portfolio careers. But it took a while. It took a few door knocks, and it took a few doors closing before realizing, okay, here's the secret sauce. Here's how to position myself, and saying, here's how I can plug in and amplify what you're doing, because you may have a content team or a socials team or an editorial team, but you don't have this.
Yeah.
But it's taken a lot of resilience. That has been a real resilience journey.
Yeah, it is one that I find has resistance. There's no doubt about it. And again, I completely agree with you. We've already got people doing that. Why would I pay you to do something I've already got a team to do? And it is about that gap, filling that gap, being, as I said, this is my thing and this is the difference I can bring to you. Can't believe we've been going already for over half an hour. So I am going to have to wrap up with the question that I ask every single one of my guests, which is, Natalie MacDonald, if you're in charge for just one day, what would you do?
In charge of
anything you would like.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. And that's normally the response I get to that question.
If I was in charge, honestly, if I was in charge, I would get a group of really influential caregivers together. So thinking about Georgie Dent of the Parenthood, Samantha Payne of the Pink Elephant Support Group. I would get, and there's so many whose names I'm going to kick myself with for not thinking of
who they are
after this. But I would get together a group of influential impactful caregivers and lay out, this is what caregivers, and just by the way, I use the term caregivers really intentionally because I'm not just talking about the mums. I'm not even just talking about the dads and the non-birthing partners. I am talking about those who may have parents or relatives or grandparents or are caring in any sort of capacity. Just to mention, I do that really intentionally because families are all different ways and we all carry different responsibilities with us. But I would get the caregivers together and actually get them to the productivity roundtable and actually talking about what do professionals and organizations and the economy need, particularly in the context of the AI transformation. What do organizations need to be doing to ensure that all professionals can show up and do their job, get remunerated for it, and build a workforce and an economy of the future. That's really it. And that's why, as I say, I am so happy and so pleased to be supporting those conversations online and in the spaces that I do and helping others on their journey to do that.
That is a beautiful way to exchange what has been an incredible exchange. Natalie MacDonald, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Evan.
Big thank you to Natalie, and I really hope you enjoyed what was a great conversation. Loved all of her insights. You can tell her passion, and the passion is what she's clearly sort of alluding to, that you need to drive that brand forward. Get the habits you need to do and understand that, yes, there will be institutions that are slightly resistant to what you might want to do, but it works. And it does certainly drive that forward. So Nat, thank you so much for coming on. To you out there, as always, thank you so much for listening, watching, and everything in between. We have done a lot of the research, and at the moment, a lot of you haven't hit subscribe. So if you can, please hit the subscribe button on whatever medium you're getting this through. The more subscribers we get, the bigger we can grow. And don't forget, we've got an email. It's exchanges@evanlucas.com.au. If you've got any questions, ideas, guests you want me to get on, all of those in between as well. But as always, thank you so much for listening. We'll speak to you next week.